Hello and welcome back, and it's sourdough today. It's been a while since I've posted a sourdough video, and this is a long one, and the reason is I completely changed my sourdough technique probably about 6 months ago, and I've been changing things along the way. The reason being is to maximize the yield from the starter itself, so you get the most out of it, and you get. Now, I've seen a lot of people on Instagram that got quite flat loaves, and this is, you can see how much it rises if you use this technique. The gluten's mega strong, the starter is mega active, and you are able to create a sourdough loaf from start to finish in a fairly short amount of time if you maintain a really active yeast throughout. So this is the technique. Like I say, forgive me, it's slightly long. But it needs to be, so I can show you everything that I do. Take care, stay safe. Me and my good wife are off to El Gato Negro now in Manchester for a meal, an actual restaurant meal. I cannot tell you how I'm excited about it. I've had my hair cut. It's been quite a week, and hope you are well. Bye.
Okay, so the first thing you need to do is add 325 grams of mineral water or filtered water or whatever you have. But don't use tap water, as I always say, because it kills the yeast, and that's the last damn thing you want. And add 500 grams of very strong white flour. Disregard what that bag said on it. I just use it to hold the flour when I'm transporting it from a 16 kilo bag that I have living in the shed in an airtight container. Because at the start of COVID, everyone was mad buying flour, so I went straight and got a caterer's pack. No messing around. Okay, so mix that water. We're going to autolyse this flour. We're not going to add any yeast to it yet. We're going to mix it as sort of barbarically as we can with the back of a spoon. Put some oil on your hand so it doesn't stick, and then basically very basic kneading. You don't want any sort of... We don't want much gluten to form in this. We're going to let that do it itself. So this is just basically mixing all the water into the flour and just making sure that every molecule has got an atom of water in some form on it, so that the gluten can start to form by itself. So once we've mixed it in, and it's basic as that, that's just took me about 2 minutes. Going to cover it, put a lid on it for minimum 30 minutes, if possible an hour. Take the cover off, and we're going to add 150 grams of fresh active starter straight on to that dough there. Okay, so straight onto it, and because of that we got to mix it in. So I do that by pulling out the edges and folding them back into the center, basically, which I'm going to start doing now. So stretch out the edges. You can see it's tacky, isn't it? Gluten's already forming there without even doing any kneading. So we're going to fold all that yeast into the middle, fold it over. Also, what I've noticed is baking this way seems to really hold the sort of fruity, boozy, heady smell of the starter. It's just incredible. The best technique at the moment that I'm using is this one. So I've stuck with it for a while now. So as you can see, I've started to fold it over, and now I'm starting to knead it. I'm going to pull it out now, put on the work surface, and start to knead it proper, and just scraping off as much as that starter that's left in the bowl as possible, because it's all measured out, of course, isn't it? So we need it. Okay, so I'm just pulling away, not going mad, just pushing away rather than pulling back with my fingers, pushing away with the heel of my palm and pulling back with my fingers, and he's off. Here we go now. The washing machine starts. When I feel that the yeast has mixed in, because if you add salt straight to yeast, I've noticed I've not added any salt whatsoever yet. So because if you add salt straight to yeast, it kills it. So this process, and the whole theory behind my process here, is that I'm trying to maximize the starter, make it and maintain it as active as possible, so that if possible we could bake a loaf within, I don't know, 8 hours maybe, or you could knead it and get it ready at the end of the night and be baking after an overnight proof first thing in the morning. So after about, I'd say 4 minutes of kneading, I add in all the salt. 11 grams of salt gone in there. Okay. So I'm going to mix that all in now. cover it over with the dough, mix it in. And in a moment, I'm going to use the French slap technique that they use for baguettes and such, for high hydration. Now, this is 65% hydration. There we go. So I'm slapping this. But this technique is possibly the best for forming gluten, rather than kneading it with the palm of your hand and pulling it out of your fingers for 8 or 10 minutes. This seems to really, really, really create strong gluten. And the theory behind this is that after 3 stretches and folds rather than 4, therefore cutting off another half an hour to an hour of time, the dough is ready to be proven for the bulk fermentation. So that's my theory behind it. So after a seriously, I'm going to do the window pane technique now. So after about 8 or 10 minutes of kneading, the dough is ready to be transported into the bowl. As you can see, window pane, everything's fine, gluten is formed. That is just going to sit there now for minimum half an hour, preferably an hour. And back we are. Take the cover off, we're going to pull it out, and we're going to stretch and fold it now for the first time. So what I'm going to be doing is pulling it out from the sides. I used to pull it all over the work surface in a single membrane, but we can't all do that. And this is much easier and much cleaner. So I'm pulling out the edges. 1 pull and then into the centre. 2 pulls into the centre. 3... 4, you can see it's starting to resist now, isn't it? See, it's actually trying to pull up the whole thing. So 5, like a pentagram. Roll it over. Oh, 6, hexagon then. Roll it over, and then we're going to leave that again for another half an hour to an hour in the bowl. Cover it over. See you in a bit. And we're back. So now we're going to stretch and fold it outside of the bowl, what I call the tongue. So we're going to pull out the tongue and stretch it, and we aren't going to force stretch it. We're going to use its own weight to stretch it and see how strong it is. So it's fairly sort of relaxed at the moment, isn't it, the gluten? It's stretching out quite easily. I'm going to stretch out in one long tongue and then roll it over itself, fold it over itself, and then roll it up, you'll see. But when I roll it up, I sort of roll it across the layer of the gluten. So, stretching out like this, I'll explain it in a sec, basically. So, all that gluten's in a single line. All stood to attention, ready. Folding it over now. Trying to get the least amount of air bubbles in. Sticking to my hand. Fold that over. And I'm going to roll it horizontally. There we go. Horizontally to how I stretched it. Okay. And that's going to go straight in the bowl. And we're going to leave that for minimum half an hour or preferably an hour. Cover your hands with oil. That's what that rubbing is. I wasn't excited. And I'm going to pull it out again, give it another stretch and fold. This time I noticed straight away that it is resisting. There is so much strong gluten in there, it is resisting. It's not as relaxed, is it? You can see it yourself. That's about as long as I'll be able to get that. I'm going to rest it on the table and then fold it over itself again. But I honestly, straight away I could see that the gluten is strong with this dough because of the process that we used so far. Pop that bubble. We don't want bubbles. No matter what the textbooks say, you don't want bubbles. You'll have enough bubbles at the end, don't you worry, pal. And again, I'm going to roll it across the direction of the gluten. Okay, so rolling it across again, horizontal to how we stretched it. Pop any bubbles on the surface, put it in the bowl, and leave it for a minimum of 30 minutes, preferably an hour for the last time, because this time we're going to stretch, fold, and shape the dough in one process. Cover your hands with oil. Pull the dough out. Out we pop. Attempt to stretch it because, again, this is really, really resisting being stretched now, which is exactly what you want. So I'm going to stretch that out as much as it'll let me. Another reason for stretching is to release any gas and remove any bubbles and stuff that's formed during that 30 minutes to 60 minutes fermentation. Fold it over itself. There we go. Nice and gentle. And then I'm going to roll it horizontal to how I stretched it yet again. But I'm going to roll it as tightly as possible. You'll see, just rolling it in with my fingers. Keep the seam underneath. There we go. Keep the seam underneath. And then start to hold the outer edge of the skin and pull it towards you. And now we're forming tension on the surface of the dough so that when we prove it, it's as strong as possible. Okay. Wipe the surface down. It's getting a bit loose. Quite oily, you see, all that olive oil I've used. So I'm going to stretch. I'm going to pull it against the skin, the surface skin there. Keep pulling back. A couple more times. There's a lot of tension there. In reality, and forgive me for saying this, but the actual texture and tension that you're after is the feel of a silicone implant, basically. So that's what you're after. That sort of level of firmness and tension, right? That's what we're at. That's where we're at there. So now we're going to cover it in absolutely tons of flour because 65% hydration, quite sticky, that dough. So we do not want it to stick to the banneton covering while it proves. So tons of flour all over the proving basket, all over the bread, and then I use semolina as well. I do not want this to stick. It'll all cook, don't worry. The least flour they use, the better, I would say, because you don't want a gob full of flour when you're eating a loaf of bread, okay? It's not the most pleasant thing. So proving basket covered in flour now and semolina. I'm transferring that back to the dough, and then up, flip it over. So the seal is now on the surface, and I'm gonna pinch all that bit there where it's opened up together to return all that surface tension. There we go. Make sure it's pinched together. That won't tear apart while it's proving. That's pinched together. That is like glue. That is solid glue. That's not going to open up. Don't you worry about that. Cover it and leave it to prove for however long it takes. Either overnight in the fridge or on the side for maybe 5, 6, 7 hours. God only knows. It's all to do with the starter, isn't it? But what you'll have done using that process is maximise, and boom! Look at the proof on that. Ready for baking it is now. So preheat of oven and cast iron pot, 240 degrees. Put the pot in there and leave it in for a good half an hour when it reaches temperature, so make sure it's absolutely baking hot when you put the loaf in. Measure out your non-stick grease-proof baking parchment. Flip the loaf over like that. Carefully remove the proving basket, but because you've covered it in so much flour and semolina, it will not stick. Voila! Cut it 3 times so that when it expands in the oven, it's got room to expand. That's the other thing to this. We're going to get that perfect high-risen boule shape. Okay? Pull that cast iron pot out of the oven. That is absolutely scorching. Do not touch it with your fingers. Your skin will stick to it. It's that hot. Tuck it in. Tuck it to bed. Put the lid on it. Make sure it's in the right spot. And then get your atomizer and spray it around 15 times to make sure there's an absolute ton of steam in there. And throw it in the oven. Set the timer for 40 minutes, 240 degrees, and boom, look at that. Absolutely. Oh my days, that bread was absolutely stunning, and also really, really held that boozy, fruity sourdough sort of smell and taste. Look at how risen that is. None of that flat pancake bread you're showing me on your Instagrams. Oh wow, so good. bit of butter, seasoned to perfection. Take a big bite out of it. Can't share that now, that's all for me. Social distancing, you know the rules. Take care, stay safe, and like and subscribe. Bye.